2 o'clock, I'd like to call the City of Ocean Shores Planning Commission meeting to order. It's Tuesday, April 8th, 2025. It's 2 p.m. We're meeting in the Ocean Shores Library on Point Brown Avenue in Ocean Shores. Roll call. Commissioner Bricker. Here. Johnston. Here. Kern. Here. Lawless. Here. Peterson. Here. Ward. Here. Okay. Commissioner Bees will not be joining us today. So can I have a motion to approve his absence?
I'll make that motion.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Next is the approval of our meeting agenda. Do I have a motion to approve our agenda? As written. So moved. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Approval of our last minutes from our planning commission meeting on March 25th. Do I have a motion to approve minutes as written? So moved. Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Okay, that brings us to public communication. Anyone in the room have anything they'd like to share with us? Okay. Anyone from afar?
Hi,
Vita?
Mark.
You
Hi,
have any-
Mark. It's Vida. No, I don't have any comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, if there's no comments, we'll move forward to metal fasteners. Marshall and I had a really good meeting the other day. And Roy joined us and we came up with some interesting perspective changes to what we had written. And we also found some unintended consequences of this section that we're looking to change. Marshall, did you want to say anything?
No, we'll work through the red lines that we came up with, and then I actually found another thing.
Did you? Okay, good.
We need to discuss regarding this code, so.
Okay, so page 6 of 9 of our agenda. I want to remind folks that 17.50.210 section H 3 and 4, the planning commission had already approved those two sections prior. And then we move on to I3. Marshall?
Yeah, so I3, all permitted structures on the property must be in keeping with the home's architectural design and finishes. That was just to add in sheds and those kind of things that would maybe have a different look or feel. The only thing that we had a hard time grouping into this statement was like a greenhouse, because a greenhouse is going to have its own look and feel. It doesn't necessarily coordinate with a garage or a primary structure. So that was the only thing that we wanted to lump in the sheds and some of the other outbuildings that might get constructed besides just an attached or detached garage. So all permitted structures, meaning a structure greater than 200 square feet on the property.
Okay. And then we moved on to J, exterior finishes must meet the following. And we took out other non-metallic appearing and added in architectural metal siding is required on primary structures. Architectural or ribbed metal siding is permitted for outbuildings, unpermitted structures, and permitted accessory structures. And A goes on to say the exterior of primary structures, outbuildings, and permitted accessory structures must be a minimum of 2 types of materials or variations of reveals. Window and door trim count as a second reveal. Architectural metal siding is allowed as an accent only up to 50% of any wall and not the primary siding material. Marshall, do you have anything on that to add to that?
Yeah, so just so that everybody understands how we will interpret that in planning. When we talk about unpermitted structures, we're talking about less than 200 square feet. And in J1, a unpermitted structure, meaning less than 200 square feet, would be allowed to use wood style insulated lap, architectural metal or metal siding, which would be required on the primary structures. Architectural metal or ribbed metal siding would be permitted on these outbuildings. The permitted accessory structures, that's your garages. So, and that would be in excess. A permitted accessory structure means a structure in excess of 200 square feet in conjunction with the primary structure for a home. So that's how we would look to interpret that.
Okay. Okay, so. Go back here.
So in reading that, Mark,
Yes.
the last sentence, we're talking about, the first sentence is talking about requirements on a primary structure.
Yeah.
The second sentence seems to imply to me that architectural or metal siding would be permitted for outbuildings, unpermitted structures, or permitted accessory structures. I think what we intended to do with that was do unpermitted accessory structures, meaning an accessory structure on a lot with a home less than 200 square feet, and permitted non-accessory structures, meaning the other, that would bring sheds into the fold.
Yes.
The way we have this written, and my interpretation is that permitted accessory structures, meaning a garage, I would have to give a yes to if they wanted to apply ribbed metal siding or architectural metal siding. So I think we just need to modify that language to refer to the unpermitted accessory structures, meaning a shed on a lot with a house less than 200 square feet, and then a permitted non-accessory structure, meaning a shed on a lot, and that's going to be at 120 square feet maximum. So I'll go ahead and make some notes on that.
Okay.
And then we'll kind of look at that going on.
Okay.
The more I looked at that, the more I felt like we just permitted metal siding on garages.
Yeah.
When it says metal siding is allowed on a permitted accessory structure, on a residential lot can be a garage in conjunction with a house. So we just need to make that correction. I think what happened is we transposed the meanings of those two structures. And what we were intending to do for the rest of the commissioners is we were wanting to bring the sheds into the fold to allow for metal siding to be used on the sheds and then outlined as an accent down below.
Yeah, we're trying to clear it up, not make it more confusing.
So the way I look at this from the planning department, to back up just a little bit, Section H of this code talks about roofing and roofing materials and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then J talks about your siding materials. So I've been looking at, these two sections of code, trying to get the sheds to where we can get them to where we don't have to go, red tag 1,000 sheds in Ocean Shores because of non-compliance. And I think this group has indicated, that we want to move forward with that concept for certain structures. And I just want to make sure that, especially on the siding, those certain structures are limited to a permitted non-accessory structure, and also the unpermitted accessory structures under 200 square feet in the residential zones. Okay, so that's kind of
Then in 1B, where exposed fasteners, architectural or ribbed metal siding is permitted. Fasteners must be specifically designed for a metal siding to be the same color as the siding and must be installed with uniform spacing as recommended by the manufacturer and carries a manufacturer's warranty of 20 years. Now, that was an addition that came from our discussion last week.
So if I could add, Mark, the thing that we talked about with Roy was to include the language that's included in the R6A and B language that requires that 20-year manufacturer's warranty on the siding. It looks to me like because there's not a comma between fastener and architectural. Basically, B is talking about the fasteners, not the siding specifically. Where exposed fastener, architectural, or ribbed metal siding is permitted, fasteners must be. We're talking about the fasteners in there. And the fasteners are required to have the 20-year warranty, but we haven't in any of the other language required that 20-year warranty like they've got in the other two R zones, basically Division 12 and 5A 24 over in that northeast corner of town. So I think when we talk about, we need to add that language into either J1 or J1A. We'll have to look at that and see what's the most appropriate.
Okay.
And then on the roofing, we didn't include that language in the already approved roofing that you guys looked at. I had a note that I put on here after going, because I reviewed that again today. Exposed, and this is from H4, exposed fastener, ribbed, or architectural metal roofing is permitted for non-accessory structures, unpermitted accessory structures, and permitted uninhabited outbuildings. I put a note in there that would be less than 200 square feet. Okay, and then continuing, fasteners must be specifically designed for metal roofing, be the same color of the roofing, and must be installed with uniform spacing as recommended by the manufacturer. And I put down, this is the language that I'm suggesting, and carry manufacturer's warranty of 20 years, the same as for the fasteners. That would apply to the sheets as well, the metal sheeting. And then that would be consistent with the other language of the other two zones. Okay. And then I don't think I had anything else. In B, I didn't see anything, no changes there. No recommended changes in that area. Seemed pretty straightforward and easy to enforce.
Okay, we can get these changes done for next meeting. Any questions by any commissioner?
So we'll review everything, all the changes, the whole thing again, and basically vote. I mean, if everybody's in favor, we'll vote to send it on.
Yes, so next time, if we like the wording and everyone's happy with it, we'll vote to send it on to council for recommending to change the code.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, just to clarify, I mean, for those that weren't here in the beginning of this discussion, we've had, some additions to the group. This whole thing was brought about by all of the sheds coming in with exposed fastener metal roofs, less than 200 square feet or less, and non-accessory structures coming in on undeveloped. Got a ton of them out there that have metal roofs on them with exposed metal fasteners that this code currently prohibits. So rather than, try to go out there and locate every shed with a metal screw in it, we want to change the code to allow for that in certain circumstances it's pretty narrow change. We're not, you know, we got into some scope creep early on in the discussions, and we had some proposed language that all of a sudden would allow a barndominium to be built in Ocean Shores. So we scaled it all the way back down to just the metal roof on a shed or metal siding on a shed. So I think that was the intent. And then we are allowing some metal accent up to 50% of a wall, but no more than that. So if you guys have any questions about the direction we started and where we're at now, happy to entertain that.
Based on our discussion that we had last week, we came up with a couple of unintended consequences that covered a couple of other sections. So 17.50.115 non-accessory structures, standards and applications. Section E of that, the exterior wall surface, it's on page 8 if you're following along. The exterior wall surface of non-accessory sheds shall be constructed of non-metallic wood-like appearance, wood, vinyl, and or resin. So the non-metallic wood-like appearance has been added to section E of that particular code. And again, we'll after everybody's had a chance to review that again, we'll vote on that next meeting when we have them all ready to go. And then the next one was, we realized that we need to add to the definitions in the Ocean Shores Municipal Code 17.50 based on our discussion to cover awnings, canopy, and intermodal shipping containers or connexes. And so on page 9 is the definitions that we're proposing to add. Awnings, an architectural projection that provides weather protection, identity or decoration, and is partially or wholly supported building to which it is attached. An awning is composed of a light over which a covering is attached. A canopy is defined as a permanent structure or architectural projection of rigid construction over which a covering is attached that provides weather protection, identity, or decoration. A canopy is permitted to be structurally independent or supported by attachment to a building on one or more sides. And the intermodal shipping container or connex is defined as a 6-sided steel unit originally constructed as a general cargo container used for the transit of goods and materials. If you're not, we've all seen the containers, but a lot of containers are converted to connexes for used at building sites or construction zones and that kind of thing. So again, we'll look at those, see if anyone has any issues with those, and we'll vote on that next time as well to send forth those additions to definitions in the Municipal Code 17.50. Marshall, any comment?
Yeah, just to give a little bit further definition about what we're looking at out in the community, the canopy is the tubular or wood frame structure that looks like a carport. Sometimes they have a metal roof that wraps and comes partway down the sides, but they're typically open on one or more sides. And we've had, you know, several of those this winter fail in the wind. And so it's another one of those structures that comes in with metal siding on it, metal roofing on it. So we're just looking to, you know, further define what it is, and then these things fit into the building code. A canopy, did we take this definition straight out of the building code?
We straight out of the building code,
Yeah,
yes.
same thing with the awning. So the awning is the can be that fabric or poly-tarp type tents that you see in the yards. Those are prohibited by current code. for long-term use, they can be used for temporary use for like a garage sale or whatever, set up in the front yard, have your garage sale and then take it down. And so we're just looking for, code to define those two things because we've got people calling them different things. The canopy, again, is that tubular metal structure or wood metal structure with a roof. You see them over like temporary or inexpensive carports or boat sheds, that kind of thing. So we're looking to just make sure, because those things are required by code to have engineering for our wind speeds out here. And that's kind of where we are experiencing the failures is in the high wind. After a couple of years in our environment down here, they start to rust and whatnot. And then from there, we had one, fold up around a boat and, a couple more failures of that nature. So that's what this section is intended to do, is give. And we don't have, if you currently do a search in the Ocean Shores Municipal Code, you will not find reference to a shipping container, an intermodal container, or anything in the current code. So we want to get a definition in there, and then there are certain places in town where they are allowed and certain places that they won't, but for temporary use, say on a construction site during construction. So did we discuss where are we going to come back and look at other code as to where to allow the intermodal shipping containers? I don't remember how that discussion finished. I know we needed to define it, but we haven't defined where it can be used other than the metal siding and the size of a building. The 200 square feet came into that.
We had discussions about, well, twofold. One, to get the definitions into the code, and two, we had a discussion about that they're already allowed in B1 and B2,
Right.
but that we were not leaning towards allowing them in the residential areas.
Yeah, not at all.
So,
Well, I can't say not at all. We have been allowing them as a temporary structure to store building materials and tools and stuff like that. They are a secured thing, but we're talking about language that would prohibit the extended use and requiring that currently we require that they be removed from the parcel before a certificate of occupancy or a final inspection is done. That's part of the final, is to make sure that those kind of structures are out of there.
yes. Any other comments by commissioners?
I just have, for my own personal clarification, just looking at the awnings and canopy from just a non-building permitting verbiage to layman's terms, I almost look at those as being descriptions backwards. And that's just because when I think of awning, I think of the one that's on my travel trailer that comes out and goes back.
Yeah, and that is the code. Do we?
Would he attach to a home or a garage or something on the property rather than mobile?
When we were discussing, we used like the sunsetter ads that you see, talking about the awnings that are retractable.
Oh, right, yeah. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so we used that as the example during our discussion.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yes, Norm.
About those intermodal shipping containers that are converted to use as a residence, put on foundations and so on.
Well, they wouldn't be allowed because metal siding. That would be my,
Yeah, it would, if you could forego all of the other things and put something like that in, there's a level of efficiency. But once you start complying with the energy codes, you'll almost put more money into trying to convert a Connex to something that you can live in. As opposed to, by the time you get it insulated and the efficiencies to where they need to be to pass inspection.
It should be more of a style than anything useful.
I agree. Yeah, they're starting to, there is a look and a feel that some people find appealing to that kind of thing. So
We also have the 650 square foot minimum.
Yeah.
True, yeah.
we've had some of those come in as proposals in the business zones and we've entertained them. It's just they can't get through the internet. That is an area where metal siding can be used, the metal siding and roofing can be used in the commercial zones, so.
Sort of self-regulating, given the cost.
At this point, yeah, with our current regulations, yeah, they're self-regulating. I don't have any fear that we're gonna be able to get one into a residential zone at this point. So,
Anything else on that for today? I've got a quick update on bills in the legislature, Senate Bill 5184, the parking mandates, which passed the House, or excuse me, passed the Senate. It's in House committee now. So we'll be watching for that. The other one, House Bill 1183, Building Code Development Reform. They've changed the name. It was energy efficiency, now it's Building Code / Development Reform. That's passed the House and it's in committee in the Senate. So executive session was actually yesterday on that particular bill. So we'll keep looking at those as we go forward. Any comments on those?
There's a couple more on local option tax for short-term rentals too.
Do you have a bill number?
The numbers, let's see. Senate Bill 5576 and House Bill 1763.
Thank you for that. It's easier to trace them that way, just like on the energy efficient, they changed the name. So, but with the Senate bill or the House bill number, I can easily go in and look at the data on those. So thank you for that. I'll do that and add that to my list for next time. Okay. I'd like to introduce Scott Harris. Thank you, Scott, for coming from the Department of Fish and Wildlife. Our next topic is trapping in ocean shores. And we've had some incidences of citizens coming to us with some property damage caused by beavers. And so one of the things I've promised here is that whatever comes up, we'll put it on the agenda, we'll talk about it, we'll see what we can do. If there's things we can do to make improvements, that's what we're here for, is to serve the community. So this has come up. We have seen pictures of property damage.
And is that local?
Yes, that's here. And what we've discovered by it being brought to our attention is that in the municipal code here, it says trapping whatsoever takes care of it. So I'll pass it to Dan, who's spearheaded this.
Well, as Mark said, the code says, trapping is prohibited, period. So, and I've heard that other jurisdictions are not this restricted. So maybe you could.
So, yeah, Ocean Shores does have a pretty restrictive trapping code, and that's just something the city, that's part of. I don't know when that came in, but I think we all realize that Ocean Shores is kind of a special place.
Well, I can actually answer that because in the research, the last time this one was updated was 1976.
Long time ago.
Long time ago, the population was a lot different
Yeah.
than it is now.
Well,
Yeah.
a lot more wildlife habitat then too. So, so that's the city's rules. I mean, they could say, okay, we're not gonna have one, and then it's still under, so I'll just kind of deal under state rules, assuming the city didn't have a rule in there. In the case of a beaver, the landowner, the family member, employee, or the real tenant of the property could set a trap and try and trap that beaver. Now they can't use a body gripping trap without a permit issued by us. Now if they catch the beaver, they either have to release it on site or euthanize it on site. And euthanize, just kind of, euthanasia laws, it goes down to the veterinary guidelines. Which are really, really restrictive. So you effectively have to shoot it in the head. And guess what? Ocean Shores has non-projectile ordinances. I don't recommend, I've had to euthanize animals in town. I have to dart animals and you gotta be on the ball. You gotta, I mean, I've got the training and experience. They're, just like the officers euthanizing, animals. There's a lot more than just sending a bullet down range. And to go into the realm, with beavers, and I have lots of concerns on the trapping thing. In setting a trap to catch a beaver, you're also potentially going to capture other things. So, and so it's not quite as easy as all that sounds. And then what happens if you catch a federally regulated species? Or hey, the neighbor's dog just happens to get out, and again, you're using a live trap, but in the situation with beavers, it can end up badly. And, I have had people, contact wildlife control operators that, and the wildlife control operator will go through the process of getting a permit only for it to come across my desk and go, oh, hold on here. We've got an ordinance and I'm gonna respect that ordinance. But the other end of it is a big part of my job is trying to get people to live with wildlife. And so, I mean, I'm curious, what type of damage are we dealing with? I haven't really had the city reach out to me regarding any infrastructure issues, which is gonna be my kind of, an infrastructure problem. As we know, Ocean Shores has got some unique drainage and, and so it'd be, some of that, okay, we need to move fast on this and trying to figure out how to rectify it later or mitigate it later. Or we just try and talk in people's truths. There's a lot of information out there on how to, fencing around trees, stuff like that, to prevent that damage. Docks, putting metal sleeves around stuff. Sometimes a common method in some cases is electric fencing, but now we've just run afoul of another code. So is there room for improvement on these? Yeah, I'd be set out against a free-for-all trapping thing, just because I know I spent a lot of time rescuing animals out here at some point, and and the other end of it too is like, so let's say you do have a WUCO come out or whatever, so that second time that permits come out, you've just triggered a mandatory visit by me, and I'm gonna look up, because part of it is what mitigation techniques have you tried? It seems like I see it all the time in there's rural areas and even in some cities, that's immediately people jump to trapping. And that never solves the problem because there's always another one right behind. And honestly, I haven't had too many calls. I mean, if I go down into those smaller animals besides raccoons, is people calling complaining that the otters are eating all the fish. So I don't know what, it's like, well, that's what otters do. So, for me, that's the big one. So, you guys did bring up the relocation stuff. And so one thing with the relocation, there has to be a relocator that's licensed and permitted in the area, which we currently don't have. I did make the request through our people that work with that to see if somebody was willing to adopt Ocean Shores. Maybe not Grays Harbor County, but hey, let's just take Ocean Shores. The big, and I haven't heard back, but we might get lucky. The big one is I don't know, is it, what we talking 1 or 2 beavers? Because it's only gonna, beavers don't have all the science. I've read it and all, but I can't spew the numbers out right now, but they kind of self-regulate in some ways. And You know, so how big of an issue is it really? I mean, you know, like I said, if it's an ornamental tree, I mean. Maybe I get it, people don't want a fence around it, but then some people are really creative and make some. I mean, I always kind of tell people anymore, go on to Google and look around, because my idea is not gonna probably fit into yours, but some people do some really crafty things that become more of a artwork, you know, or, you know, a border.
What would your thoughts be? If we moved to change our municipal code to be closer to what CW says? Right now, we can't trap anything whatsoever, but the RCW allows if there's property damage or injury to humans.
Yeah, I would be, you know, for me, you know, so long as the citizens are gonna buy off on it, I would like to see any case above, trapping, you know, say, you know, setting up something for rats, you know, any trap larger than, say, a common rat trap require some type of okay through the city, because you're gonna get people that, you know, we all, you know, I mean, we all have, a lot of people have a pet cat that gets out once in a while, or they let them out. And, you know, it's too easy, and I've seen this where people are basically, oh, I'm setting a trap for this reason. And they're really targeting the neighbor's cats. Or we've got a raccoon problem that really has more to do with somebody feeding them in the area, which raccoons, I mean, I'm pretty heartless when it comes to raccoons that have been fed, because there's more than, you know, you have zoonotic disease issues. But a lot of times, you know, with Ocean Shores, with wildlife, we've got a huge food source issue. From garbage to people, even though there's an ordinance against it, we still got people eating. You know, that's what really creates this problem out here. So to see something that the city is controlling, you know, I'll use the example of, you know, you start setting a trap that would catch a beaver, you could catch a bear cub, you can catch a fawn. And for me, you know, I'm one person, there's only in our entire region, there are 3 of us that are equipped 24/7 to immobilize. So when that happens, if we're not available, now other things are going on here. I much happier to have the animal control officer call me up and say, hey, you know what? We're probably gonna be setting some of these traps in this area. Are you gonna be around?
So it's my understanding that if you get a response, you coordinate with the chief of police.
I would coordinate, so even if I'm gonna set a trap in the area, or in the city, I coordinate usually through the ACO. You know, the animal control officer, which I. But I think, you know, part of it depends on it, you know, some of that is maybe required that they use, you know, consider in certain species that they use a wildlife control operator. There's a permitting and a training and an expertise there. You know, like I say, I think there's a bigger discussion to this, to the nuances, but I wouldn't be opposed to it. I just really think that there needs to be communication, you know, especially with the police department, of what's going on when you get into the bigger things. And then what is the city's, you know, Ocean Shores is pretty darn wildlife friendly. I mean,
Right now, it's
yeah,
it's
Yeah.
a total ban, using the words as we discovered
Yeah.
whatsoever.
right.
So in order to change that to more clearly state what the RCW says instead of our much more restrictive code, just wanted to make sure that
Yeah,
you weren't overly opposed
I
to being closer to the RCW.
no, I think that's up to the city.
Okay.
I mean, is where I am. My concern is, like I say, we've had it before where, you know, somebody sets a trap because, oh my gosh, we seen a coyote run down the road, so they set a trap and now they got a cougar cub in.
Right.
You know, and that's pretty much a death sentence for that cougar cub, especially if the mom is bad to move on or something. Which, is it a biological loss? You know, are we threatening population? Well, no, but now we got, you know, it just gets all messy. And then everything gets so political anymore. I would just let, you know, my recommendation is some type of oversight by the city, consistent with what the city sets as their values.
Well, if we as the commissioners here in the planning commission decide to update our current code, like I said, which hasn't been updated since 76,
Yeah.
to be closer to reflect what the state allows, because right now
Right,
there's nothing, and there are guidelines that allow, you know, trapping with, you know, reported and then not by citizens, but by wildlife folks.
yeah, and I would say part of me too, it's, you know, I think even a wildlife control operator come out, you know, are they supposed to have a city license? Should they be telling the city what they're up to? I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a lot different than say the agency. where
Right.
We're doing some different things, but like I say, even when I set a trap in Ocean Shores, I'm letting local, you know,
You're communicating.
yeah, and I think that's the big one, and I think that, you know, and just because of the nature of Ocean Shores, you know, and you've got some polar opinions. Like I say, I mean, just next door to Ocean Shores, I can go to a property right now and I'm gonna bet there's a trap sitting there. It may not be set. But, you know, you know, and there's just a lot of things can go wrong.
Well, we value your opinion, and if we decide to move forward to council, you'll be invited
Yeah,
there as
yeah,
well,
well,
right? So,
it's my big thing, like I say, is being consistent with state law, you know, is great, makes my job a lot easier.
Okay.
But part of it's what Ocean Shores about, you know, and I just, the nature of Ocean Shores, the diversity of wildlife out here, really think you know, there's just, for certain situations, there should be some type of city oversight there. Because like I say, the random, you know, you can go to Tractor Supply and buy this trap, you know, that's like this tall, you know, you can catch a lot of things in that. And like I say, I mean, Ocean Shores, one of my grumbles, you know, over the years is, you know, when I do set a trap out here, I normally catch everything but what I wanted, you know, and we had a scenario just outside the city, where we were trying to get a specific animal, that, you know, it was a bear, and, you know, got everyone but the right one, but, you know, then what we found out is there was a deer in town that really loved maple bars. And it was no problem climbing into a bear trap, which is unheard of for a black-tailed deer to do that. But apparently it really liked it. And then it just about a month after that, we had an elk climb into a bear trap to get after Krispy Kremes. Well, obviously they've been fed them and they really like them. And, you know, and it's like, and how the elk, that one, we never got caught in it because it was just too big, but the deer did. So, but yeah, going back to it, I think updating those, you know, and I think that's some of that the city's got to navigate with its stuff. I just really, you know, a lot of cities do have some type trapping stuff, but you know, I mean, I get calls, you know, one of my frustrations is getting a call, and it's happened to me in Aberdeen where I get there, you know, I get this call and this lady, somebody has set this trap for the, you know, because they have a raccoon problem or perceived one. I get there and it's like, they set a trap without a plan. They think I'm gonna do something special with this raccoon. Well, I don't relocate raccoons. You know, and technically it's illegal for people to relocate wildlife in Washington. I have some leeway just because of what I do. But raccoons, you know, you take a city raccoons, the odds are it's got distemper, all that. I'm not gonna take it out in the wild, dump it off there. And now I've got a local event going on. But in this case, I go there, well, it turns out they're feeding all kinds of feral cats. The raccoons are living under the house. And it's like, okay, here's our problem. It's this food source issue. And so I don't want people to think, and this is, I think we're having that city, some of that city oversight, that's how you solve the problem, because I've been fighting it for years now. We've got a food source issue out here and we really need to keep trying to address that. And like I say, but beyond that, I don't know how that's gonna help you with beavers, because you know, there's certain, like the Havahars, but there are certain live traps for beavers. They're just shy of $1,000. And they're not easy to set. They take some hard work. But they're again hiring the WUCO when it's consistent. But like I say, if you planted a tree, and the beavers eat, and it's like, no, put a fence around it. I mean, that's what I do. A lot of what I do is that living with wildlife stuff, and I mean, it's the same thing I do with some farms. I might go, okay, yeah, we're gonna remove this animal that's eating your livestock, but I'm not gonna do this too many times. You need to correct these husbandry situations. So sometimes I'm just buying them time because there's always another one right behind it. That becomes kind of the issue. So, but it did, short story, yeah, I think bringing them consistent with some city oversight. And I just, because of the area, I just really think running that through the police department, because there's also potential safety issues if you catch something, even a fawn, and you get some does that'll go ballistic. And I mean, I mean, everybody freaks out on some of the carnivores. My two that I get concerned with the most, or am the most cautious around, are raccoons and deer. Those are the only ones that have ever tried to get me. I mean, I've handled a lot of other animals, and it's like I can kind of predict what they're gonna do. You just might as well, just when you're going into it, going, okay, this one's gonna try and get me. And deer, I mean, and just loading them up with enough drug to put half of us down in this room. I've reversed it. As soon as that brain starts working, they're not calculating escape, they're calculating how they're gonna kick my butt. It is kind of a funny one. So anyways.
It's currently written for Washington State Game Department to coordinate with the public safety director. And we've gone around, who's the public?
Yeah.
Who's the public safety director? And we've determined at this Kodak moment, even though it's not currently referenced, it's the police chief.
Yeah.
So, Dan, do you have anything more?
No, well, I guess I do. Are there people, I think you probably said this, that there's not many people that will trap for you?
So as far as for the purposes of relocation, there are very few right now. That's actually, so just a few years ago, we started a pilot program, and now it's kind of become, I think RCW, because we had to change some RCWs because beavers are one of those ones that by law, I can't even relocate a beaver. I think if I'm reading the RCW correct, but they did start a pilot project. And now, we went through a whole thing of setting up how to permit them and all that. And there's just a handful of them operating in Washington right now. Part of it is to relocate it, you've got to, one, there's a holding time. You gotta kind of verify that they're disease free, because we don't want to be trucking diseases around, which, generally beavers are pretty clean, but you just gotta be careful. We've learned the hard way on these things. And then it's gotta be suitable habitat. And it's gotta be approved. We gotta make sure, the last thing I want is somebody to take a beaver and put it into somebody, someplace where it's not wanted. Because guess what? Now here we go again. And it's getting tough to relocate animals. I mean, there's people out there, there's all these other deals, but I mean, and that said, I advocate, we've got some rivers on the Olympics, take them up the headwaters, dump them out, because maybe some of them will take. You know, they used to be there historically, but you know, that's a little haphazard. But so as far as for the relocation person, there are a fair amount of wildlife control operators, but they are lethally removing. And sometimes that's what's needed, but normally I'm gonna be looking more at, you know, an infrastructure issue, road damage, you know, like I say, there's kind of some passes, you know, you know, if you fill out everything correctly, normally that first permit's gonna go through at a request, but it's the second where I'm gonna be looking at it. And we don't get that many of them, but I still don't have enough time to check everything. But yeah, we have the wildlife control operators, but as far as people who are relocating licensed, there's very few, there's none in this area. Like I say, I just reached out. I mean, I don't even know, like I say, I'm not aware of the extent of the damage. I really haven't had that many calls or seen anything on it. You know, and even then, even a wildlife control operator, to be consistent with their permitting, is supposed to recommend stuff first, so they may go out there and it's like, you know.
If I understand it, the closest one to us is located in Elma.
No,
No. Okay.
Elma, so Elma is a wildlife rehabber, not a beaver.
Gotcha.
So, even then, so let's say we rescue a baby beaver out here in the lake. The closest one for me to get that to would be in Quilcene. And then she's going to work with the department and the rehabbers to find a release location for that. There is you know, so that's where the confusion is we've got rehabbers, but then there's the relocators, and that's a whole different beaver permitting process. You know, it's become a challenge because I did last year, I ended up rescuing this beaver and, you know, and put a bunch of time into it, got a rehabber, got it healthy. And it went on for months trying to find where can we relocate this thing to, you know, and you know, and the poor rehabber, they're sitting there, you know, they've got big bucks into this beaver, and now they've got it ready to release. Well, it's still costing money, you know. So, but yeah, so that's the differentiators. One is the wildlife rehabbers and they can do certain wildlife. I work with Twin Harbors all the time. They're great, but they're kind of a small facility. We've also got another one in Long Beach, kind of the same thing, small facility. And then we luckily have got, we've got a bird one over in Discovery Bay in the Squim area. But then there's, Center Valley Animal Rescue, which is a pretty large facility. So normally you set up a relay network and you can get the critters there. So like if say a fawn that needs rehab from Orchard Shores, there's a you know, I've got a local volunteer that helps out, but we can relay them or I transport them. But there again, we try not to do some of that.
Well, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, that's a big one there. And like I said, I did reach out. There are some organizations that, you know, work with communities on living with beavers. But like I said, I reached out just because it's like, well, you know what, maybe, you know, I don't know how many beavers we have, you know, there again, it's kind of a new one that comes up, but honestly, in the past few months, I've been getting a lot of beaver calls. But part of it, this morning I was out driving around one, it's not a beaver call. It's actually, we've just had so much rain and drainage sucks in this area that, you know, the ditches are backed up, but I can go to the drainage district, follow their line down, and it's just, there's a lot of water here.
Yeah.
So if a resident had an issue with beavers and we had allowed trapping, would they And they talked to the city, say the animal control guy said, yeah, you got an issue, so. What would be the step to get it removed or whatever?
So there's where the state law would come in. They could, if they had the means to trap it themselves, with a live trap, then they could do that. Or if they had, and this is where, you know, where one of my concerns would come in, and let's say maybe they had a trapping background. And say had had a conibear style trap, then they could, in theory, get a permit from the state to use that. And we're not, when they put in for that permit, we're not really checking it, if it's a landowner, that they are actually qualified to set that. It's kind of way how the RCW is written. But what the most common one is there, the timber companies, citizens, cities, some cities have trained staff, some counties and DOT has its own trained staff. But the most, and a lot of those guys are actually wildlife, they've got their license. But they call a wildlife control operator, which let's just say it's similar to a pest management company. Some pest management companies do. And are also what we call a wildlife control operator. They would go through the permitting process to us to get the permit to remove, one or two beavers or whatever.
So if we put in our code that we didn't allow citizens to do it,
I don't see anything wrong with requiring it to be a wildlife control operator, even to the point of licensed by the city. I mean, or, cause I don't know how that works if somebody, say you call up somebody and they're out of Elma. Do they need a license to operate in the city? I don't know how that works, but I think that would be reasonable to require a professional to do the trapping for those larger size animals. I'm not aware of anything that would prevent the city from doing that, but I think that's a reasonable one just to kind of to help prevent unintentional catches.
I have a question, if I may ask it. When we had some residents come in, they showed us pictures of the beaver damage and things like that. And during, there was some discussion back and forth, and if I remember right, I believe that they said that they had called the state. And the state says, gosh, I'm sorry, but we can't help you because of the rules of, the codes that they have, the ordinances in Ocean Shores. So if we were more, and I know you kind of alluded to this too, is that so if we were more in tune, with the state, would you say, okay, yeah, I'll come down?
So I don't always come out.
I know, but I'm just saying, or would you come down and present them with a look at their situation and say, well, maybe you could do a fence, maybe you could do this, maybe you could do that? Or does that still, if we change our,
So it's gonna depend on who they talk to, but generally speaking, yeah, if I have time, but you also got some, one thing I find with Ocean Shores is you've got a lot of city staff that learn this stuff really quick, I guess that does, it does put us into that. How do I say that, so generally, we don't respond to beaver damage. We say, okay, call a wildlife control operator. But with Ocean Shores, I tend to do a lot of things that I don't normally do. So, I think, in some cases, yeah, I would be more willing to work with them. But as far as this, I guess it's kind of my fault for making staff aware that Ocean Shores has an ordinance against trapping. And I think how that comes across sometimes from people, it's sometimes you got customer service staff that are just, or what we call our special trapping staff that get some of this, and they've got a million other tasks, and so they're pretty, I was, it's kind of like talking to a 911 operator, you get bing, 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 you know? And
There's no gray area currently.
No, no.
It's
and
black and white.
I think having the ability, I mean, probably gonna be unpopular with people, but I think being more consistent, having the ability to use a wildlife control operator. With some city oversight, you know, I mean, that's, you know, like I say, requiring that. I still think there should be some communication with the cities.
Is there some sort of a, if we, and I don't know where our situation, you know, what our authority or whatever it is, but if in fact we wanted to suggest to the city or whatever, I don't even know if it falls into the planning commission, that we wanted to set up some kind of a public information thing about the different things that can be done by the people to control the damage. I mean,
So we have quite a bit of that on our website.
okay, that's,
Yeah,
okay.
And the other one, and that's, you know, I am, apparently we're in the process of making some. But we've just reached out, you know, when Mark gave me a call and, I need to start looking at. And what I found out is we don't even have a flyer on beavers. And so apparently we are in the process and getting pretty close, I guess, of having some informational flyers to, you know, on living with beavers. Which I think would answer that question, would be something that's like, okay.
Just curious.
Yeah.
So,
No, it's, like I said, we have our website, you know, what I find, like I say, I kind of tell people to Google, but we do have living with wildlife stuff. Could it be better? Yeah, probably. But we currently don't have a flyer, but I think having that flyer, I think that's kind of what you're asking. for.
it is, it is. I mean, so even as a city, we could say contact, you know, or make it available to them or whatever. So.
Yeah. And I, you know, unfortunately, I cover, the entire coast. And plus I supervise, the private lands position, which I'm trying to shove most of that work on, but I got a brand new employee. And I think, what is it, 9 counties? So I'm spread a little thin. So, because I have wanted to kind of work on improving communication out here. One, people don't know how to get a hold of us sometimes. And for some calls, like I'm dispatched through our Wildcom, the same one that dispatches our enforcement officers. We run on Spillman, but then other stuff has to come in through, you know, through the customer service people. And then other people are just handing out my cell phone number, and I've got one sitting on there. I don't know where it's from. You know, and it's like, okay, not a priority because I specifically asked for addresses. You know, but it's hard for me to keep up with it. But yeah, you know, just I guess going back to which, you know, I think information is a great one. We, you know, like I said, I'd like to say I'm gonna do better at it. Plus budget doesn't look too great, so I might have more work.
I got you.
So,
Sure.
but you know, bringing things, you know, that I'm not opposed to it. I just really think the city needs, you know, I would be opposed if there wasn't some city oversight on this, and especially the communication with the police department.
Yeah, I just personally think that we would be well served if we moved closer to what the RCW says, rather than just
Yeah.
black and white whatsoever not. I think we'd all be, as a community, be well served. So there's an option
Yeah,
to deal with it if there's a problem of property damage or injury,
right,
which the RCW allows. We
Yeah.
do not.
right. No, I think that makes sense to me. I just like to say some oversight. And there again, sometimes looking at what is the property damage. I mean, technically, I mean, it's, you know, and I foresee some changes coming down the road that are gonna make it much more restrictive. You know, especially like on beavers and stuff, because yeah, you know, beaver eating your tree, you know, that we're kind of falling outside of conservation and all this stuff. You know, and when a lot of these laws were written, these were just considered nuisance animals and served no purpose on this planet. It's just, you know, you can only, as you all know, you can only change so many, you know, administrative codes at a time,
Sure.
and anytime you open something up, you may not, it may come out of it something you didn't want.
Right, unintended consequences.
Yeah,
We
you know,
understand
and
that.
then, yeah, and then changing an RCW, you know, there again.
Yeah.
You know, we work with, you know, our elected officials to do those sometimes, but it's, you know, they're. You can only do a onesie twosie thing if you try, you know, so it always kind of falls on the back burner, but it is. Something we've talked about, we need to update some of our traffic stuff, just because of what we're seeing out there.
Any other commissioners have any comments? Scott? Oh,
I have another
yeah.
question.
Oh, please, yes.
Different subject,
Okay.
bears. Seems like we got a lot of bears.
Well, we've got, yeah, it's kind of a frustration one to me, cause it's all about the food source. And I just. You know, it's like we just had it sounds like just within the last week, we had another sow with 2 cubs coming to town. They're yearlings, but based on the observer of them, pretty good, you know, somebody I trust is like, okay, this is all new one. We've just got this huge food source, and it's a function of part of this population growth. We got everybody puts their garbage out the night before. And
Not anymore.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't anymore.
well, I
Lose it.
yeah, we still have it. You know, it's funny, I was thinking as you guys were talking, it's like, you know, cause. Yeah, it's, I mean, there's just, that's our big thing, and we're seeing this growth up the coast. And it's not, what's that community up there?
Seabrook?
Yeah, it's not Seabrook. Everyone wants to blame Seabrook. Okay, I don't care what people's opinion of Seabrook is, I've been there. It's a pretty clean place. I mean, they've had a couple of bear issues, but they generally, they don't let garbage sit out at night. It's, you know, but we've had, you know, these Airbnbs, these short-term rentals. Have just been kind of, you know, like last year, it's like my phone didn't stop ringing from some of those up there. And there again, it's all this food source storage issues. Ocean Shores, the bears come down. And it's like, they're all about the junk food, even though they're a carnivore and a predator. You know, most of their protein comes from scavenging or eating bugs and stuff. And you've got people that come down, they come down for the weekend, this, you know, and I'm gonna say it's been over 10 years ago, I went dumpster diving in Ocean Shores one time just to see what was going on. And I come down Sunday night, I'm popping lids, and I'm telling you, they throw some good groceries away. And the bears know that. And, you know, birdseed, I got people that will call me every year. If a bear hasn't got up from hibernation to get into their bird feeders, they think I've trapped all the bears and moved them. And I was like, well, why you shouldn't have your bird feeders out? This is the problem. So yeah, and you know, what comes down to is sometimes, so it becomes the same old relocation game. I've got a bear that the city is basically taught to eat garbage. And now I've got to, you know, if I relocate it, I've got to try and take it someplace where I need to get it at least 30 miles from town. And I had one that I think she was 31, she came back. And you know, so even then you get up, say, into Clearwater, and keep in mind, we've got other communities, you get on I mean, some areas, you know, we got hundreds of calls a year from everywhere. I mean, it goes into the thousands with bears, but just on the Olympic Peninsula. So I've only got little areas where I can release, and if I oversaturate that area, you know, there's people that live up there. There's small communities. And they do a pretty good job of living with wildlife. But now I'm going to bring in and start. And one of the things that's happened, you know, as I was relocating, I started seeing, you know, one thing that changed when the wildlife conflict position was created is I started we mark every bear. And, you know, per law, if we mobilize it, it has to have an ear tag in. But anything I touch, it's gonna get an ear tag, especially if I mobilize it. Whereas the old days, they just take that bear off and just truck and dump it off. That bear could beat us back here. You know, I don't, you know, knock on wood, I've got some areas that it's just very rare for me to have a bear problem anymore. Since one, I put more work into relocating them, but you know, for me to do, it's a minimum 12-hour day, sometimes longer, and sometimes that bear's hopping into the trap at the wrong time, you know, and basically my life goes on hold when that trap is set, because I have to be available. You know, so there, and you know, getting into it, one of the things I'm seeing people do down here, I'm starting to see people build some bear enclosure for the garbage cans. Some of them, well, some of them pretty stout, others, I don't know why they're working, other bears are lazy. But I've also seen a couple, it's like, well, that's great, but you know, 40 nails and a cedar thing on, you know, with a 4 foot on center, that is not gonna keep a raccoon out, you know, and so, you know, they're having part of it is like, they almost need building codes on how to build the enclosure, you know, because I think that's a really good option for people that, to put, you know, especially put your garbage out in the morning, is have that enclosure. I mean, I keep saying I gotta build one myself, but then, you know, I keep looking like there is some, recommended building tolerances, some different cities or, you know, materials, and every time I look at it, it's like, oh, I'm gonna have to buy more of this, and you know, I get, but so I have to use a ratchet strap at home. The bear resistant containers that are currently provided, I'm not a fan of them. I'm a strong believer in a certified bear resistant container. I've got a couple at the office that I wanted to use as a test thing, but you know, the garbage contractor just doesn't talk to us anymore. And so I don't know what to say. But you know, there's a night and day difference between a certified bear can and then what's currently offered. And I get it, the cost is, you know, well, if you know, for a large company, if you order enough, you're gonna get that price down, so it does. And I think just the lifespan of those cans, I mean, they're tanks. You know, originally they were tested by Grizzlies, now they actually have black bear testing. They have some, I think it's the Wildlife Management Institute set up a deal where they test them, you know, and basically they fill them full of junk food and chuck them into a pen with a bunch of bears, and it has to survive an hour. And you know, it's kind of funny, for years, everybody's like, well, we don't need Grizzly certified. Well, the only ones that are passing black bear tests are the ones that are Grizzly certified. You know, and it's funny because the Grizzly will put more effort into it, but I think when it comes down to sugar, no, we got the junk food bears. Yeah, so for me, you know, really comes down to the food source issues we have in this town, and how do we get control of that? You know, we've had some people feeding in town. I still suspect a couple people, but can't prove it, you know. You know, and then whenever, you know, in a perfect world, sometimes I'm like looking at it going, you know, I got some time. Maybe if I try and, you know, get those bears, you know, but well, then all of a sudden in town shows up a mom with yearlings, you know, or not yearlings, this year's cubs. Okay, now I've got a big problem. I'm really reluctant to set them because just Murphy's Law is going to strike. Like right now, I do have some sow, you know, I have the one sow with 3, and her yearlings they don't look like yearlings, they're tanks, but they're still a little young. But I've also got one bear in town that, because he has been fed, I'm reluctant, you know, if I get them in a trap, I'll probably just euthanize it.
Hmm.
Cause I'm not comfortable with relocating. And that's where the issue comes in. So I may, you know, at some point, when I think we're at the window, I might say, okay, we're gonna give them a pass this time. You know, or do I just mark them and re-release it? You know, which some areas, if you watch the news or your YouTube, you'll see these bears and they've got 3 ear tags, you know, or 2 ear tags in them. Okay, well, that's one of those areas where they release them on site, pays them. I'm not a big fan of that, cause it just seems like a lot of, you know, but, you know, I see these things and they're thinking, oh, cute, and I'm thinking, oh, one more and that one's done. You know, and I kind of give them a 1 strike deal. But again, I'm very careful on what I relocate, and when I relocate. And what is the damage? I mean, if it's just garbage cans. You know, I've only had. Well, like I say, I did have one where the people admittedly had barbecued a coho, they just caught. Threw the guts in there, they caught fish. There's some leftovers and the bear went right through the fence for it. And you know, but there again, I'm looking at, there's that cheap cedar board. And I mean, I think I'm lucky if it was a 4D nail holding that thing on. So it's like, yeah, that's not gonna slow them down. So.
Not the smell.
Yeah, does that kind of answer your question? Because as far as how many bears, I don't know. We've got the bay over here, you can go out on an airboat. And, you know, you hit it at the right time of year and there's just bear after bear after bear.
Yeah, we hadn't seen a bear in our street for 10 years.
Yeah.
And last Thursday got every garbage can on the.
Yeah, and part of that, like I say, is, you know, the population increase. I mean, where I live over, you know, in North Cove. And we occasionally have a bear come in. As our population increased, guess what? And then I start getting calls from an area in Westport I'd never gotten before. It's like, well, there's nothing there. I clearly have not been paying attention because I get down there, it's like, why did they build all this, you know? And yeah, I mean, because bears just wander around the landscape. We get some years, you know, I've noticed a change where we've got some that are hanging a little tight, but it kind of noticed that as the berries come on, they'll filter off, but then they come back in the fall. But it just seems to me we got all these bears, they just come down the coast or the bayside and they find all these garbage cans.
Well, they're multiplying too, because I know on my ring alarm, we get neighborhood alerts all winter
Yeah.
long, and I can't even count how many sows with twins and sows with triplets we've seen in the ring camps all over this peninsula out here.
Yeah, are they the same ones or, I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
It's hard to tell.
yeah, so that, I mean, I try and keep track, you know, I watch the posts on social media. And I've just kind of given up because, you know, I mean, I'm still trying to keep track, but it's like, okay, I reckon it's like, where'd that one come from? You know, we did have a scenario here a couple years ago where we had a sow that was, she'd end up too close to a house and was getting way too much attention from the neighbors. So we thought, okay, well, we're gonna get her out of here. So I went up, spent a god awful amount of time finding and making sure building a den for her up in the national forest. And so we go in to immobilize her, and we were gonna haul our cubs off and her and her cubs off. Not a preferred thing, but in that scenario, you know, we knew people were going in and saying hello, you know, which is just not a smart, you know, most of them that do hibernate, you'll never know they're there. And anyways, what happened when they went to immobilize is for some reason, number one, she was an Ocean Shores deer or bear. And it was actually one of our bear specialists kind of beat me out here. And he had to give her 2 darts. And basically she was a lot fatter than he thought. So she didn't go down all the way. So she took off and abandoned the cubs. So we had to put the cubs into rehab and we released them, you know. Need to check on them, see how they're doing. They were released with GPS collars. So they, that's not a preferred situation. That is a very rare situation to do that. But the whole thing is where did she come from? I didn't, it's like, okay, I don't recognize this one. And because we, had our pictures, I think we had a sow with triplets at one point. We had 2 sows with triplets, but I think at that period of time, we had a sow with triplets, a sow with, twins. And at least one, we call him Duncan, the big bear. He's been here for many, many years. He was around before they built Oi Hut. I can remember him. And so I just figured one of these days he's gonna die of old age. And if that does happen. But then, then the cameras also, where the hell come from?
Yeah.
I mean, and so as far as how many, the good thing is they're not really super dangerous unless you gotta really screw up to get them, pretty much any wildlife, but like I say, I am more concerned from a public safety thing with raccoons, number one, and deer, number two. Raccoons, big one is because of the diseases they carry, and so when people feed them and concentrate them, and they will. I've dealt with more raccoon bites, and the majority of them are because they were demanding food and they didn't get fed, or somebody fed them late. And so now we also supposedly have a new state whack on wildlife feeding. I haven't read it yet. I don't know how it's gonna help me or what it will, because it's more geared towards ungulates. But anyways, I don't know if I answered your question or, if it's unfortunately it is a complicated, and there again, I'm sometimes dealing with, what I believe is what the city, the constituents of the city want, and it's, which is kind of a challenge sometimes, but Ocean Shores is not the only place we have bears. It just because of the geography of the area, and it's just they come down here and they're here, and it's like they smell that wonderfulness, and I think we just got to keep educating. To me, I would like to see codes that says you can't put your garbage out the night before. They don't. In these areas where I have them, where they say, yeah, you can't put it out before say 5 a.m. I don't get near as many calls, but then you get Long Island or Long Beach, again, you still have that peninsula. And the bears, of course, bears swim across Willapa Harbor all the time, but they get out there and it's like, oh my gosh, this is just miles and miles of garbage cans. So,
Smorgasbord.
Yeah.
Pardon?
It's a smorgasbord.
It is, and it's, when you look at their calories, say this time of year, the calorie requirements similar to us, you look, depending on the size of the bear. And, and then as you get into the spring, and then you go into in the fall when they're going into hyperphagia, where it can be 10 to 20,000 calories per day. But you look at just the calories in a bird feeder. That's an entire day's calories for a bear versus going around eating grass and grubs and, or picking blueberries, and having to try and spit out the leaves or crab apple. That's why, it's been proven in the literature that, bears with this access to human food sources tend to be obese, in the bear world. And then they get it figured out. They had one, I think it was at North Bend, that it was actually hibernating in the median. There was some trees out, and they'll sleep. It's not always a cave or anything like that. Sometimes they'll just curl up on the ground, or in the crook of a tree, or, they find it's just different everywhere. Anyways, he'd get up every couple of weeks, and he had a favorite dumpster in town at I think it was like a tavern that sold really good fried food or something. And he'd go dumpster raid every couple of weeks. He'd just get up, snack time, and back they go. And we see that once in a while. We see that in Ocean Shores. You know, some people want to say that bears don't hibernate. Well, actually, all bears hibernate. Even in Florida, black bears hibernate. Hibernation is an adaptation to, you know, well, it's not even a true hibernation, but that's what we call it. And sometimes I get called out on. It's like, it's a blue jay or a stargate, they're the same to me. You know, but where they have, you know, so that's this adaptation to lean food times. And, you know, just like us, you know, we know there's cookies in the refrigerator when we kind of turn around, it's like, yeah, you know, and the other thing is bears. You know, one of the things that was interesting to me during the pandemic, and I've seen this, you know, many years ago, I worked for the Quinaults, and, you know, on their beaches, there's not as much public, so it's not abnormal to see a bear out there during razor climbs. And I had not had a report of it, you know, but during the pandemic, somebody witnessed a bear out there digging razor climbs. You know, so there's another food source for them, but because of the people, and they don't feel safe to it. And I don't, you know, I live, like I say, I mean, stone's throw from the beach or a little more than that, but, you know, and I've never seen bear tracks out on the beach, you know.
Anything else?
Just a quick thing, while we were discussing this, I went to your website and there is a whole thing on beavers.
Yeah. But it could be, I think there's,
You scroll down and it's even got a
Yeah.
preventing conflict, living with wildlife. Preventing conflict just shows pictures of wrapping trees. with
right,
Wire form, not super elaborate, beautiful artworky ones, but
Right.
it shows how to prevent it, right?
yeah, and I think, you know, like, I didn't have a chance, but, you know, like, Beavers Northwest, I think, has some stuff, but there's a lot of stuff out there on the web. I mean, I deal, you know, it's like, I look at like chicken coops. There's all these hard and fast, here's how you should design them, you know, never buy one from Tractor Supply. You know, that's my first recommendation, but there's so many great ideas out there on the internet anymore. If you're looking in the right spot and you're not going with what you want to hear, there's a lot of great ways to do predator resistant stuff. You know, with the beaver things, like beavers, like I said, I'm gonna say Beavers Northwest. I just watched a presentation of theirs a while back and they had some pretty cool pictures and unfortunately, we don't have that stuff, but that's kind of what they do. It's teach people to live with wildlife. And so what I was kind of hoping is maybe they said, well, yeah, we'll adopt Ocean Shores and come down and talk to people and maybe, you know, hey, here's some different things people have done. You know, because yeah, I think ours needs work, you know, but you know, some other states have better ones. But we do cover, you know, most species, we have something, you know, if there's some type of conflict there. And I'd say generally speaking, you know, I've seen, you know, I've seen some interesting things people come up with, you know, not so much beavers, but with other stuff that, okay, according to literature, this shouldn't work, but okay, yeah, it's working for you, so I'm just gonna shut up, you know? So,
Well, Scott, we appreciate you coming and providing your
Yeah.
insight, and I think you've been very helpful
yeah,
on moving us forward. So we appreciate your time and effort.
yeah, no, and I'm more than happy to come and talk more or, you know, work through stuff, but like I say, I do agree updating those. I just really I don't want to have another situation where we get cubs in a trap that could have been really, really bad. And you know, that was, you know, it's funny when the comments made, it's like with the one weekend Scott isn't available, you know, I mean.
Right, exactly.
But they got creative and, you know, and there's things, and then like I say, I do try to respect, you know, it's just Ocean Shores for what it is. You know, you guys should probably realize you got a different community here. And it's a very unique.
Yeah.
And I'd say part of that's why we have kind of our bear issue is just the uniqueness of it. I mean, I don't know if that's in your ballpark, but ways that we can try to reduce the amount of food sources for bears, because that would be, that's the big one. I mean, you change that. It's one of those things I wish I want to do some more research on. Because communities that have adopted certain, ordinances towards stuff have really reduced the amount of, bear problems.
Yeah, and I don't think we have anything. I think we have LeMay tells their customers
Yeah.
that they have to be out by 6 AM.
Right.
I think that's the only
Well,
guidance.
they changed it. They used to say the night before, now they say the morning. They're recommending the morning of. But that's one of it. It's even storage, even, bird feeders. I mean, I get it, people want to feed birds, but just don't, it's, I come to properties, people call me up there and I'll look right on the porch, is the hummingbird feeder and all that. And it's like, just bears have learned to go up there. It's like, or people feeding their pets on porch. I just had a scenario with, I believe, it was a sub-adult cougar. Turns out all the people that called me, the humans, are feeding their cats plus feral cats on their porch. Well, you had a feral cat, get up there and eat your cat food and probably a couple of your cats, and, but it's, I can guarantee you, it's like I turned around and said, I just looked at where you're at and said, you're gonna be calling me in the spring about the bear up here on your porch. So, yeah,
There was one on social media today with exactly that.
with it.
Someone was feeding their cat on their porch.
Yeah,
I'm not sure where it was, but, and the cat heard something, turned around, and there was mama and 3 cubs,
oh, yeah.
right? Cat went out,
Mhm.
right? And the bears came up and enjoyed what was left.
Oh, yeah,
of
no,
the, that was in the bowl. I mean, so you're right, that's out there.
well, and it leaves that scent. I mean, I have this one cat that I don't think she's really feral. I think it's just somebody abandoned her. And so she's pretty much lives on my porch. And I normally just give her a handful in the morning and a handful in the late afternoon. But I got lazy a while back and I misplaced her bowl, so I was just putting it on the porch.
Oh.
And here I am, I tend to get up pretty early. I'm sitting there on my porch and all of a sudden up pops a raccoon's head. And I know that's what they smell. Cause there's never any food really there at night. But it was just that, because normally I had that bowl and I would take it in and set it in every night. And, and then of course I got chickens and everything else, so I've got attractants. But I think a lot of it is just learning to live with them and, that it just reduces that conflict so much that, it's, years ago, it seemed like, well, years ago, we basically had people, we probably had, it equated into 3 or 4 full-time positions, just trucking bears around. It didn't help. They just come back, and, or worse, you end up having to shoot them, but at least everything I touch now has a ear tag in it. And I don't set traps as often, part of it is you unintentionally orphan things. It becomes a train wreck. And the end result is you remove the food source, well, it kind of goes away. So it's like picking apples. We get a good apple year and it's like a nightmare. But you pick those apples or knock them down on the ground anyways. And the problem goes away because, it's inevitable. I get calls because the coyotes eating the apple on the ground. They want me to do something about the coyote. No, I'm not picking the apples up. And, for some people, I get, like last year, I had an elderly couple and I had a couple of volunteers that needed some hours. It's perfect. And what had happened is they normally had somebody that picked their apples for cider, but because it was a banner apple year, they didn't eat them. And, these very elderly, frail, they clearly could not go out and do that themselves. But I had some retired guys that needed some volunteer hours, and boy, they slicked it up real quick, so.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Appreciate you you coming.
Yeah, and like I said, give me a holler. Hopefully I didn't anger somebody out there.
I'm sure you did. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah, and, yeah, I like the idea of requiring a roof. You know, and then roof as a city.
Perfect.
I think,
Yeah,
I would ask you to check with, well, I'm sure you're already gonna check with council members.
Oh, sure. Well, we've got we're an advisory board.
Yeah,
So if we put something together, we have to
Yeah.
get it through council, which is why I said earlier, you'll get a call
Oh,
at
yeah.
that time for your ideas to
yeah,
council. So we
yeah,
appreciate you sharing it with
Yeah.
us today.
really think having city oversight on it
Absolutely.
versus just going with the state thing makes a lot more sense. And if it's gonna resolve, maybe prevent a lot of headaches down the road.
Yeah, we don't want unintended consequences.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay, well, moving on. I did have a meeting with the mayor. And so just so that you're aware, we will be looking at municipal code 15.24.020 under wiring methods and materials. Talking about metal sockets, if and when replaced, whatever the wording is, we'll work on it, obviously. They must be stainless steel, but anyway, that's coming forward.
That was 1524.0.
15.24.020. Yeah,
020?
020, wiring methods and materials. It's not currently there, so it's A through E in that particular municipal code. We will be adding F.
Back up just a little bit.
Yes.
How do we want to proceed with the draft?
Oh, yes. Well, I think with trapping, we should make some changes perhaps to what our proposal is, or if.
Why don't I take a stab at writing changing, what I've got now is not enough.
Okay,
I need to add some more based on this conversation. And I'll have it ready for next meeting.
perfect. And we'll vote on it. We'll put it in the agenda and we'll vote on those changes if the commission approves. And get it forward to the city council. Anybody have any other thoughts on it?
I think it's great.
Any other reports by commissioners? No, okay. We'll move on to public communication. Anyone in the house have anything to say? Yes, ma'am.
Well, I was the lady who had the beaver problem.
I'm-
I'm one of the neighbors, anyway. And the damage is considerable at our house. Just in pots that he ate was about $600 for the pots. They were wooden barrels and trees up to those ends.
Yes.
Kind enough to grab that. He also did the stanchions on the dock. So on both sides, he's eaten out.
4x4s, pressure treated.
Right. So he lives in a lot over from us, or a family does. We're not sure how many of them are there. We have now removed all of the pots so you could no longer do more damage. So that's just, that's money that's down the toilet. Plus all the plants that we had grown. There were 12 pots.
trees.
Yeah, 12 pots with the trees. And our neighbor, who was here at the last meeting, I
Yes.
believe, she and her husband, since they showed you or I think you got that picture, Dan. Since then, he's been back to their house. And the unfortunate thing is that now he's taken down a whole nother tree or part of a tree, which they put the wire around the tree. So, and they also ended up bringing in, those railroad ties. They're all fenced, just like we are.
He tunneled under their fence.
To get there. So it's a real problem, and I understand what this man is saying.
Yeah.
About trapping and such, but I can tell you that when it comes to money, which we don't all have a lot of, we want to be able to protect our things. And if there's some way that can happen, I'm just more in favor of that.
Well, and I appreciate what you're saying. And I didn't want to, minimize what he was saying by saying, well, if it's your damage, it's really important.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's your resources that are being chewed and eaten and stuff. So,
And we did contact the state Department of Wildlife.
Uh-huh.
And they gave us a list of people who will come and trap a nuisance beaver. They're all licensed by the state. And we called one and he came out, and he's actually a state employee. And he looked around at what was going on and he gave us a bid, I think it was
$150.
$150 per beaver. And we got it all set up for him to come out, and then he called us up and he said when he got back to the office, he mentioned to somebody that we were on Ocean Shores. And they took his permit back.
And see, that's, I totally get what you're saying, and that's why we've looked at it. And it's whatsoever, I mean, there's no gray area here where you can do this, you can't do that, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
And, like I said, it hasn't been updated since '76. And so, we're gonna try to do something to at least somewhat mirror what Washington State allows as opposed to what we currently have, which is not.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens, but we'll give it our best shot.
One thing I was thinking about when he was talking, wildlife management is not wildlife protection, it's management. And out and around the state, when the populations get out of control, they have special hunts where they thin the herd or do whatever. So it's not just about protecting I mean, you know what I mean? The wildlife on Ocean Shores has no predators, pretty much. Except the deer have to worry about coyotes, but that's about it.
And
And
people
so-
driving.
Yeah, they just keep going. And there's more and more and more. The bears on our street are 3 and 4 at a time. And so you can't let your grandkids go out. You have to take bear spray to go out in the yard just to make sure. Yeah, that's not good.
It's an issue in that the RCW allows for property damage or injury to humans. Ours does not. So what do citizens do if those occurrences happen? And right now, we hear under the current code, there's nothing we can do. And so hopefully we can move closer to what the state allows.
That would be
Well,
good.
thank you for doing this. by the
Well,
way, because-
We'll see what happens.
Well, we'll be right here
We
listening.
appreciate the effort.
Yes.
Yeah. And so we'll see. Like we said, we're an advisory commission to the city council and the mayor. And the mayor is aware of what we're trying to do. And so we'll see if we approve something here, we'll take it to the city council and see if we can move closer, like I said, to that RC bank. Any other comments? Vita, anything from afar?
Thank you, Mark. No, Vita Piera has no comments. Nice to
Okay,
see
thank you
everyone.
so much.
Okay, bye-bye.
Our future meeting date will be Tuesday, April 22nd, 2 p.m. here in the Ocean Shores Library. Secretary Steve, will you do secretary duties next time, please?
Which is taking the minutes.
Yes, take the minutes on the 22nd of April. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Okay.
Approved? There we go. All in favor?
All right.
3:43. Thank you very much. And thanks for coming.